the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi on the gist today. Our guest is Ambassador Navdeep Suri, India's former envoy to the UAE and Egypt. Ambassador Suri, thanks so much for giving us time. Good to see you after a bit on StratNews Global.
Delighted to be back.
Ambassador, you yourself were India's envoy to the UAE when the Prime Minister was, say, leading his outreach to that country. And it's not just that country, it's the whole of the Gulf, it's many other Islamic nations, Southeast Asia, South Asia, who have been extremely outraged by the comments that have been made by those two now expelled or suspended BJP officials. It seems to run against the mill of what the Prime Minister himself was leading in, assiduously working to take relations to a new level with countries.
Yes, and that is the tragic irony of these developments, Amitabh, that, having served in UAE from 2016 to 2019, having seen the absolute transformation in India's ties with UAE and indeed with other countries in the neighborhood, with Saudi Arabia, with Bahrain and Qatar and so on, having seen the personal connect that the Prime Minister established with the leadership of these countries. And remember, while our prime ministers may come and go, the leadership in these countries remains around for a very long time. These are monarchies. And I saw firsthand the kind of chemistry that Prime Minister has, for example, with Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, or even with Sheikh Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. And the dividends that have come to India by virtue of that very strong relationship, the multi-billion-dollar investments that are coming into infrastructure sectors, the deep energy sector partnerships that we have been able to develop with these countries, the support that we have received implicitly or explicitly on issues like abrogation of Article 370, etc., etc. I mean, we have actually accomplished a lot in terms of our relationship with these countries. And to see some of that being squandered through these highly odious comments is really a tragedy.
So in effect, these two people, that is for this particular incident, but there have been many others in the past from the ruling party, from the BJP, have shot India in its own foot.
Yes, this is, I think, a massive, massive self-goal. At a time when we were not only cruising in terms of our relationship with these countries, not only the way we had marginalized Pakistan, which used to consider this as part of its own backyard, not only because, we are in the midst of serious conversations related to our energy security, particularly in the context of what's happening in Ukraine and the oil situation. Not only in the context of our FTA negotiations with the Gulf Cooperation Council. So every which way that you look at it, it has the timing couldn't have been worse, and it's caught a lot of people by surprise. I've been talking to some of my friends in the Indian community in the Gulf, and they can't believe it. That a party like BJP, which sets so much store by the well-being of the diaspora and its connect with the Indian diaspora, the officials of that party could be so insensitive and say things which create a sense of insecurity or nervousness amongst members of the 8.5 million strong Indian diaspora in the Gulf alone.
We're seeing these pictures, and it's coming ironically at a time when the government is marking 8 years in power. That was External Affairs Minister Jaishankar, who's making an outreach to envoys here. He's led the event yesterday of 8 years of external engagement, and extremely unfortunate that it comes at this time to overshadow that.
Yeah, and look, there's no doubt that the kind of energy that has been put into India's foreign policy by this government is really substantial. The number of visits that have been made to these countries, don't forget, Prime Minister Modi was the first prime minister to visit UAE in 34 years when he came there in 2015. And then he was back there in 2018, and he was back there in 2019. So 3 visits he's made to make up almost for lost time. The now President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed has come to India twice during that period. They've had a virtual summit earlier this year in February with a very, very expansive vision document. So if there's one region of the world where we have really seen the outcomes out of the foreign policy initiatives of the government, I think that is the Gulf. And that is where now we see the impact being the most significant. And my worry, Amitabh, is that just the sacking / suspension of the spokespersons hasn't put an end to the issue. Yesterday, boycott Qatar Airways was trending at number 2 in social media in India. And if you look at some of the comments being posted in the timelines, some of the really nasty, defaced photographs of the royal family members of Qatar, etc., I think we're just showing the seamiest side of our society. It's like putting your dirty linen out in public for the world to watch. And unfortunately, some of the trolls on social media do not understand the gravity of the damage that they cause to India's image and prestige.
How would you respond to many, including one of our viewers, Tara, who says, I disagree completely with the ambassador. This is a great game being played. This isn't about the BJP. Look at what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs, and the Gulf countries are totally silent. I mean, there is a lot of hypocrisy, but then there's a difference between China and India.
We've never, as far as I recall, the Gulf countries don't claim to be democracies, and they don't claim to be secular. We are seen as secular and democratic. Our constitution continues to say that. And so we are held up to a higher standard and a different standard, which is not such a bad thing. The respect that we earned in these countries was because of who we are. The worry that is being expressed in some of these quarters is, are we moving away from that notion of India?
Right. You mentioned boycott Qatar Airways. There's been a lot of other trending issues, boycott Indian products. There have been some reports of supermarkets in various countries, taking out Indian products. Apart from that, just give us an idea in terms of the Gulf when we're talking about. There are other countries who have also expressed their outrage in terms of huge trade, remittances, the diaspora, which is 9 million, the effect on millions of Indians abroad by something like this.
Look, I think a lot of people don't realize the significance of our outreach to the Gulf. A lot of people who do Muslim bashing on a routine basis don't understand that these are Muslim countries. They don't understand that GCC is our largest trading partner almost. It's our trade with GCC is more than our trade with the European Union. UAE, as one small country, is our 3rd largest trading partner. Last year, our trade was $60 billion. After US and China is UAE. People don't realize that our exports, UAE is our 2nd largest destination after the United States, $32 billion in exports last year. And then look at the investments that the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, the Mubadala, and other ADQ and other funds are pouring into India, not to speak of PIF from Saudi Arabia and the Qatar Investment Authority. You can see UAE investments today in India in sectors ranging from highways to renewable energy to logistics to ports and so on. These are important investments. This is patient capital of the kind that Indian economy needs to meet our aspirations of $5 trillion and $10 trillion. That capital is not all going to come domestically. So, the fact that we can mindlessly start a boycott Qatar campaign just because of a reaction in those countries. I think it shows an incredible lack of maturity on our part, and I refer not to India as a whole, but certainly to the segment which is running this campaign. They don't understand that they are willfully harming India's national interest.
And as you've pointed out repeatedly, on other platforms and even in this show, that the Prime Minister himself has been leading this outreach. But in terms of direct impact, do you see government to government any effect? Kurt Cobain asked, would this development affect the progress on a potential FTA with the GCC?
Look, I think governments tend to be a lot more resilient. Governments are guided very clearly by long-term national interests, and long-term national interests remain connected. And so I think that after this, we've gotten over this initial hump. Things will return to some kind of normalcy at the government-to-government level. What will take a lot longer to heal is the damage and rupture to the image of India in the eyes of the average Saudi or average Emirati or average Omani or Bahraini. If you see the statement that was put out by the Grand Mufti of Oman, and mind you, Oman has been one of the most tolerant countries in the Gulf. It's our oldest strategic partner. It's given us use of naval base facilities for our ships when they visit Oman. It's the site of the oldest Hindu temple in the region. There's a Shiv Mandir that the Prime Minister visited in Oman. That Oman, the Grand Mufti is being forced to say that the comments like these are akin to a war on all Muslims. And we are quite happy, in our ignorance, to then target that very Oman. We don't seem to understand the history of our relationship. We don't understand the depth of it. We don't understand the breadth of it, and what it means for the Indians that are living in those countries. Oman has some of the oldest Indian communities who've been there now for over 100 years. And you mentioned earlier about the diaspora. If you, again, just think about it, close to 9 million Indians, $50 billion plus, close to $56 billion in remittances last year. Just that one number keeps afloat millions of families around the country on a daily basis. In states like Kerala, the economies are dependent on those remittances. Do we understand that? Do we understand the importance of these relationships?
I mean, it seems to be the epitome of the cliche that is actually so true on how domestic politics affects foreign policy. And like you said, some action has been taken. We can flesh that out a little bit later. BJP members have also apparently been briefed on how they have to deal with media on questions like this. But how do you react to things like, again, Matara saying India is a democracy and therefore Indian citizens have the freedom of speech?
Yeah, I think, wasn't it Voltaire who said at the end of the French Revolution that I have a right to swing my arm, but my right to swing my arm ends at where the point of the nose of the other person begins, right? If my nose is hitting somebody, my arm is hitting somebody else's nose, then there is a limitation on my freedom to swing my arm. And so in any civilized society, there are restrictions on speech, and it's interesting for Madam Tara to say something like this when you see how the Sedition Act has been used against all manner of people because they said something out of turn. Comedian being arrested before he's made a statement because of apprehensions that it could trouble communal harmony or public peace or something like that. Of other cases where people have been put under a UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. The fact that Supreme Court is seriously looking at the whole sedition law and whether a country like India should have it. So, we can't be that selective in our treatment of issues. Yes, we are a democracy, and yes, there is a freedom of speech, and yes, there are limitations to freedom of speech in almost any country. In much of Europe, in Germany, for example, you cannot attack the Holocaust. You cannot question the Holocaust. Germany is a great democracy, but there's a limitation because of the damage or because of the past of Nazis and what they did.
You talk about the effect on the diaspora or expatriate community in various countries, especially in the Gulf. But what about the highest constitutional positions? And here I'm not the president, but the vice president. He was on a visit to Qatar, and while reports were there and then denied of any effect, there was an effect of sorts on that visit.
Yes, and even as greenhorn diplomats, one of the first lessons that you learn is that there are 3 visits from India: the president, the vice president, the prime minister, where it is vital that there is no embarrassment to the nation. And there is no insult to the guest. And what we saw was the extraordinary spectacle of the Vice President of India landing in Doha, and the Ambassador of India, who's expected to be with the Vice President, being summoned to the Foreign Office and being delivered a very, very tough protest note, which is not only delivered to him, but which is also released to the public. And I think what you saw in that was the angst of the Qataris. And of course, it had reverberations as far as the visit of the vice president was concerned. We can try and gloss over it, but the fact is that for weeks and months to come, our diplomats in the region, who have done an outstanding job in terms of promoting our relationships, are going to be on the back foot. Rather than pursue an active or a proactive agenda aimed at building a strategic partnership, defense relationships, anti-terrorism cooperation, attracting foreign direct investment, promoting trade, securing the welfare of the Indian community, all of these things that the diplomats do on a daily basis in these countries. I think there's going to be a huge level of distraction as we do the damage control, as we pick up the pieces and regain the confidence in these countries that we are not what these statements show us to be.
And again, Ambassador, this is giving an opportunity, a handle to your enemies in terms of the ISI or the Pakistani deep state, which they don't really need, which they're already on, but it just gives them more fuel to add to the fire.
Yeah, I mean, anyone at a senior level from our intelligence community in any briefing will tell you about the Pakistanis or the ISI's attempt to create disinformation or fake videos or other narratives, whether pertaining to Kashmir or other places. And that's par for the course. It's what we expect of them. But in this case, we are giving them the material. We are providing enough organic material from our side that all they need to do is make sure that it reaches our friends and embarrasses us before them. So they are having a field day, I'm sure, and it's unfortunate that at a time when really, when you look at our relationships with the Gulf, we had pretty much elbowed Pakistan out of the equation. It's just 2.5 years back, if you recall, on the 1st of March 2019, that UAE invited late Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, Foreign Minister of India, as the guest of honor at the OIC Foreign Ministers Conference, just 2.5 years back. And they did that despite intense pressure from the Pakistanis. They stood their ground and they said, it is our prerogative to invite a chief guest, a guest of honor, and we choose to invite the Indian foreign minister. So look from that point where we are, that we are having to listen to some of these demarches against India.
And it's not just demarches. Al-Qaeda has issued suicide attack threats.
Well, I'm sure our intelligence agencies will be watching that very closely. I think the deeper worry, Amitabh, is not Al Qaeda. If I look back on my tenure in the Gulf, one of the interesting elements of conversation that I used to have with my interlocutors, and a very senior member of the government would every now and then say, Mr. Ambassador, you don't realize the greatness of India. The fact that India has contributed virtually no members to ISIS or Al Qaeda. How do you do it? How is it that a small country like Tunisia, or even a small European country like
Maldives.
Belgium, or Maldives, or Belgium for that matter, has
Mm.
more members in ISIS or Al Qaeda than India with its large Muslim population? Surely India was doing something right that prevented that from happening. And there was actually an interest in understanding this phenomenon that is counterintuitive, right? That a country with such a large Muslim minority is actually not radicalized in any sense the way the some of the other countries are. But my worry is that the direction that we are heading in could precipitate a greater degree of radicalization amongst young Indian Muslims than we have hitherto seen. And that then makes many a fear of the fear mongers almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's almost as if wishing and making it happen.
There are a lot of people who argue that these people who have been both Nupur Sharma and Naveen Jindal, who have been suspended or expelled, were actually quoting from the Hadith itself, and that these Muslim countries are obviously not democracies. But the fact that action has been taken against them, however much people would say that there is more, the government, the External Affairs Ministry, has put out words like these are fringe elements. But to stop this from getting out of control, I mean, do you think it's necessary for maybe the Prime Minister, the External Affairs Minister, to step in and make public statements?
I think statements are important. Statements declare intent. Actions are even more important than statements. And if actions are taken consistently over a period of time to convey a message to the so-called fringe elements of our society, that certain things are beyond the pale of civilized behavior, and that your words have consequences for the well-being of other Indians and for the Indian state in a much broader sense, then I think we will be on the right track. I think the way I see it, we will be watched fairly closely over the next few months. And the ball's in our court to demonstrate that we have raised the bar and a message goes clearly to the rank and file that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. As you mentioned, it is encouraging to see guidelines being put out, telling spokespersons how to behave in the public domain. But I think it's bigger than that. Those guidelines may have gone out to the spokespersons, but I don't see much change in the vituperations that you are still seeing on social media against countries that are friendly to us.
To that extent, there was speculation, Ambassador, about the Iranian foreign minister's visit. He's already postponed it for twice for different reasons, of course, but that's gone through. There have been deals being signed. Do you think that this will die down?
So it brings me back to the point that I made earlier, Amitabh, that governments are resilient and governments will continue to do business with each other for, reasons of deeper national interest. But public perceptions will take much longer to heal. The fact is that many an Arab today has a poorer view of India than she or he did a week or two back. The comments of the two persons have been amplified multifold by the abuse that has been heaped on the Kuwaitis, the Qataris, and others by the online trolls. And those impressions that is this what the new India is like are going to take time to go away. So I wouldn't be complacent about it. I think it's good that the Iranian foreign minister came. It is good that we are proceeding with them. But let us not underestimate the gravity of the challenge that lies ahead.
In terms of hypocrisy, one last question for you, Ambassador, from Avanish Dwivedi. Can you please explain why the same things don't happen when, say, Switzerland bans the burqa and many other comments are made even by the French President Emmanuel Macron?
Well, that's an interesting comment. So I was at the Doha Forum, which is sort of Qatar's version of the Davos or the World Economic Forum kind of equivalent. And I was attending a session where Malala Yousafzai and the former Afghan Minister for Education and others were discussing what the Taliban are doing to education of girls in Afghanistan. And many of us are rightly concerned about it. But think that a conversation that is happening about the behavior of Taliban in Afghanistan suddenly gets distracted into somebody saying, but what about India? And what about this hijab controversy in Karnataka? And that girls are being denied, this was the way it was framed, education because they refuse to part with their hijab. So this is the law of unintended consequences, that something that happens at a very local level in a part of Karnataka, not even in the whole state, gets amplified at a very different event and ends up creating doubts about India. So, if you want to talk about what happened in Switzerland about the burqa, sure. But, I'm a Sikh. I'm today speaking from Amritsar. And lots of people in Amritsar wear a turban, right? It's a choice. Let people have their choice. If they want to wear a hijab, they wear a hijab. If they want to wear a burqa, they wear a burqa. You want to eat vegetarian. Somebody else wants to eat something else, that's fine. Stop getting into people's religion and personal affairs. Let them be.
Ambassador Navdeep Suri, again, thank you so much for your time and your perspective.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Pleasure is always ours, Ambassador. And to all our viewers, I have been able to take some of your comments. I see quite a voluminous debate going on our live chat. Do continue to engage with this particular video with your comments and any other things that you want to put up on YouTube. To also support StratNews Global. You've been watching The Gist on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.